Okay, so we'll just, it's 6 o'clock now, so we'll just give, I guess, about 2 or 3 minutes more, but it's being recorded, and so I guess everybody could listen to the recording. Hi, good evening all. We just want to give the other colleagues a few more minutes to join, and then we'll start. Does everybody have a copy of the paper?
Yes.
Okay, good. And we had the opportunity to do some research, and we ready to discuss?
Been reading.
You say you've been reading?
Yes, I'm trying to catch up on my reading.
Oh, okay. Okay, good.
Good night.
Good night, Jonelle. How are you today? Okay, so we looking for volunteers for reading tonight. Anybody want to volunteer to read the paper?
The question?
Yeah.
I can start if you don't mind.
Okay. Okay, so I was just giving everybody a few minutes to join, but I see more persons coming on. So good evening. Hope all is well with everyone. We are covering the second part of chapter 4 tonight. And it's very relatable and relevant to the paper. So we'll try and kill two birds with one stone, and we'll go through the paper, and that should help us get the bulk of the information that we need, or to at least to get us started. We'll skip over into chapter 5 a little bit because it's also relevant, and then we'll finish chapter 4. So Miss Taylor and Tanya is going to read the question for us. Everybody has a copy and has at least looked at it already?
Yes.
Okay, good, good. Okay, go ahead, Miss Taylor.
Okay. You are a regulatory compliance consultant working for international business, IB, a firm regulated in a jurisdiction and sector of your choice. You are a member of a project team recently formed to develop the approach to data protection and confidentiality with IB, following identification of a number of recent, what the hell I do now? Hello?
Hi, you're here.
Oh, sorry, I did something to my computer. I'm so
okay,
sorry.
That's fine. Have fun.
Sorry, where I left. Okay, following the identification of a number of recent minor incidents and near misses relating to these matters that have given the senior members of the firm who are aware of them cause for concern. On the customer-facing side of the firm, a recent monitoring review identified that in a small but nonetheless significant percentage of the sample tested, information belonging to one client had been incorrectly stored in the online records of several others, seemingly owing to a data input error. A brief analysis of breach incident logs in the past 2 days for the purposes of gaining initial insight into practices in this area has identified an increasing volume of near miss breaches of this type in recent months, involving staff from different departments and levels of the firm. IB is keen to address this issue swiftly to ensure there is no further occurrence of such incidents and avoid the occurrence of actual breaches. The project team has been provided with an appropriate level of resource to pursue the project, as well as access to staff at all levels within the firm to assist in its implementation. The team has the full support of senior management. Members of the project team decide to commence an immediate low-key review of the approach to data protection and confidentiality within IB. This is carried out by you and 3 of IB's permanent senior compliance and risk staff. You review logs, reports, guidance, and training materials. You speak to staff in a variety of roles across the business. What you find supports the view that the weaknesses in these areas are indeed more than one of lapses, that there does appear to be a pattern of issues/difficulties developing around these areas, and that problems are widespread. Specifically, staff appear unclear on requirements and what is expected of them. You note, in particular, that the incidents have increased in frequency since the installation of a new record-keeping system in certain parts of the business, and also following a shift to a paperless management approach several months ago, when all management and senior staff were provided with updated technology, including new phones and laptops. The challenges presented by this appear to have increased even further following the decision to increase the number of staff working from home. In light of these findings, you believe urgent action is required. You schedule a meeting with the head of risk to discuss your findings and recommend. Hello?
Sorry, can you mute your mics, please?
In light of these findings, you believe urgent action is required. You schedule a meeting with the head of risk to discuss your findings and recommendations for action before presenting these formally to the board. Taking into account all that has been said in the above scenario, prepare a report for distribution at the meeting to act as a basis for the discussions. This report should include a brief summary of your findings and explain why these findings present a risk for IB if they continue. However, the report should predominantly focus on recommendations for actions supported by a plan of this action to ensure that the risks arising from weaknesses in data protection and confidentiality are addressed both in the immediate and longer term.
Okay, thank you so much for Ms. Taylor. Okay, so I sent out a tip sheet and I put some of the topics that I feel the paper is asking you to cover. But for the most part, there are 4 to 5 questions that you need to ensure that you answer. So it's a very long question and you want to ensure that you cover all parts. And so first it asks you, what are your findings from this scenario that they came up with? What are your findings in this international business company? So of course you will just like create, you know, any company and say, you know, the head office is in Switzerland and then we are in Bahamas, and so it makes it international. The second thing that it asks you, what are the risks? What are inherent risks, and what do basically be? Sorry?
Hi, sorry, I have a question. You said
I can't hear you.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah, you sound very, very far away though.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, yes, go ahead.
You said you sent out something?
Yes, I sent out an email with just some tips about the paper. You did receive it?
No, I didn't. I just got the information for this class today.
Okay, what's your
So
name?
I don't, Robin Newton.
Okay, Robin, put in your chat, just put your email address and I'll forward it to you.
Okay, thank you. Sorry again for this.
No problem at all.
Excuse
Okay.
me, Bullard?
Yeah,
Helga's waiting in the room to be
okay,
let.
she would need to call Miguel.
She must call Miguel?
Yeah,
Oh.
Miguel is controlling all of this, so I wouldn't be able to let her in. She would have to call Miguel to let her in.
Miss Bullard.
Hi.
I'm sorry for interrupting. You could repeat the first thing that you said when you was trying to break down the question again.
Okay, so the first thing I said is that the question is asking you what your findings are based on the scenario that they created. Okay, so you wanna, when you would have done a review, you would have reviewed the logs, you would have reviewed reports, you would have reviewed guidance and training materials. Hi, can you please mute your mics if you're speaking in the background? Thank you. Okay, so your findings. After you would have reviewed the reports, you would have reviewed guidance notes. You would have reviewed training materials. I guess with guidance, they mean policy and procedure. What would you have found once you did that review? Of course, it says there are breaches in terms of data protection and confidentiality. So you want to have, and you want your focus to be on those breaches. And they mention it above. They are near misses. It appears that some of this, there was a new system. Persons were not trained properly on the system. People are working from home and they're now on a new paperless management system, or paperless, they shift to paperless management. And so again, that's a new implementation and that's a change. Are there any policies and procedures regarding this paperless system? Were people trained? Is it safe? Was it tested? So, you want to just list, first of all the errors or anything that you would have found from what they wrote. There's a breach on the incident log. There is information stored in the wrong file. So you just want to say, these are the things that you noted from your review. And you can, they give you a lot of things to put in there, but you could also just make stuff up. But once you make it up, you want to say that you went into the file room and you realized that a lot of, things were misfiled. But of course, once you put or you list the finding, you want to then say what control you would put in place or what you would recommend. So your findings first, the risk, the inherent risk, if these are not satisfied or if there are no controls in place. And then after the control is put in place, any residual risk that would be left behind. Then you want to make recommendations. You want to state what controls you will put in place. Then you need a plan, an action plan, and a schedule, because they're asking you for both long-term and a short-term plan. Okay, so overall in your paper, you want to ensure that those 4 or 5 things are explained or documented. The findings, what are your findings? What are your risks? What are your recommendations and controls? What is your action plan? What is the schedule? And in this plan, some are long-term goals, some are short-term goals, or long-term controls or short-term controls, or immediate changes that need to be made, or changes that will come in the future. Okay, so I sent out a tip sheet, and on the tip sheet, I said, we need to cover record keeping, we need to cover confidentiality, we need to cover data protection, we need to cover training and risk assessment. Now, I left one thing off because I wanted from our discussion, remember this is discussion based, and I wanted to see if anybody else came up with another topic that we should discuss in this paper.
Ms. Bullard, sorry, you said that you emailed this?
Yes.
Okay, so I could send you my email because I didn't get it.
So who's this?
Katrina Pinder.
Katrina Pinder, okay. If you were on Miguel's list to get into the class, I sent it to you.
Last week, he had to send it to me separate because I wasn't on the initial list. He said he forgot to put me on.
Okay,
so,
okay, that's fine.
Okay, so I'll email
of course,
you.
We should know everybody in this class by now, and we should be networking, and we should have everybody's number or be in a group. Is that so, or no, we stopped all of that?
The group is still there, Miss.
Oh, okay.
Donnell and everybody is doing a good job of keeping everybody up to date, at least who was in the initial AML class. Let me clarify that. Okay, excellent. Yeah. And so ensure if anybody needs to be added, please give your information so you can keep abreast of all the information and network with each other and help each other through it. Okay, so back to this tip, just tips. What else? What did I not include? Did anybody have a chance to look at it, or this is the first time we even read it to see what it even says?
Ms. Bullard, is it to deal with the culture of communication in this company? It's poor?
Okay, that's a part of it, but I'm looking for a bigger topic than just what falls under culture. If this is the first time you all look at it, just say, Ms. Bullard, and look at this. Just go ahead. Let me know. Or from what we read, what else comes to mind that perhaps, you know, look at the word where it says it's widespread. When we have a widespread problem in an organization, what does that mean? There's a breakdown where?
In communication. That isn't it, Ms. Bullard? There's
no, not communication.
No?
Management.
Okay, and management is responsible for what? What's the name of this program?
Governance, risk, and compliance.
Okay, so if there's a breakdown and it's widespread, there's a issue where?
From the top down?
In the corporate governance.
Corporate governance.
Yes, okay, yes, very good, very good. And so when there is widespread, and that's what triggered it to me, and I it's just a portion of what you could add in there. And I think it's worth mentioning that if an issue is widespread, then there must be a problem with proper governance. And so on, I think it is 261, we'll go through exactly what you should do if there is a issue and how to prevent it, because I think 261 talks about regulatory breaches, and somewhere through this paper, it says that it's not a regulatory breach. So we don't want to expand there on that, but I think it's worth mentioning and saying that there has to be some issues with corporate governance, why, you know, it's widespread. Okay, because as we go through the book, we will read, you know, this is what happened in Enron. And then another issue where it talks about the system, implementing a new system that persons are not trained on. That's what happened with Volkswagen. And so if we watched Dirty Money, or if we would have read the book, we would have seen that with Volkswagen, they implemented a new system that, you know, a lot of persons weren't trained on. And so that's how they were able to defraud the world. Did anybody watch that episode with Volkswagen, or did we read it in the book?
Yes, we watched it.
Oh, okay, good. So you see how it ties in?
Yes, definitely.
Okay, good. Because again, you're gonna need examples. You're gonna need, remember I said you get more points when you create, you know, you're able to tie in real life situations to what the question is asking you. And when you talk about the risk, long term, if you do not, you know, put the proper controls in place, this is a possibility that could occur, or you know, a breach that could, you know, affect the entire organization. Okay, so you can go from that aspect. I don't want you to focus the whole paper on it, but I think it's worthy of mentioning that because the problem is widespread. Okay, so did we look at, in terms of record keeping, what would we talk about in terms of record keeping? No response? No, that you're going to split it up with this paper, or what we doing? Do you having a discussion or no? No? No discussion?
Yes, we're having a discussion.
Okay, yeah. No, but y'all gotta talk back to me then. Y'all gotta tell me what y'all, or be good with this paper and we don't need to go through this. Mm-hmm. No? Hey. That's a question I asked you and y'all ain't talking to me.
Yeah, we could go through it, Miss Bullard.
Okay, but what is it that y'all just, you know, the opportunity to look at it or being prepared? Because chapter 4, the second part is where the question, remember I told you the first thing you should do is look in the book and see exactly where the question comes from.
Right, yes.
Okay. Well, anyway, let me just read to you my notes since, you know, nobody sees stuff. I don't know. So we want to talk about regulatory compliance. Of course, the data protection law, which chapter 4 talks about, and in the book, it talks about the data protection law in the UK. Our data protection law is a little bit different. So this is why I sent you the Ryan Pinder's speech, because it breaks it down into layman's terms. And so hopefully we can go through that rather than go through what the book says, because normally the paper say in a jurisdiction of your choice, and of course most of us will pick the Bahamas, we won't pick the UK. And so there's no reason for us to go through exactly what the UK law says. So Ryan broke down the Bahamian law for us, so we'll go through that, and for, you know, and that'll help us cover chapter 4. Then there's confidentiality. It used to be the Banks and Trust Act, Section 19, and on most of our documentation in the bank, we have that listed as you want to ensure wherever you put your signature that you are abiding by the law of the Bahamas, and we actually quote BTRA Section 19. So what that means, since the law has now been updated to BTRA Section 77, 2020, we now need to go through our, I guess, documents that we submit to our clients and ensure that that is changed. But what happens is a lot of times laws are changed, and not until something goes wrong, we look back at our documents that we're sending out to clients, and even we train our staff on the law has changed and this is how it's been expanded. So when you write your paper, make sure that you quote the current law and not the old law. And also go back into the institutions. If you work in the offshore world, normally your account opening packages are like 30 to 40 pages. And so you want to ensure that, you know, if it actually quotes the section of the law and says it's Section 19, or if it just says the Banks and Trust Regulation Act. So you want to talk about confidentiality and what it means in the Bahamas. And of course, we know years ago, we were protected by Secrecy Act, and one of these websites that I sent you talk about secrets, and even the book mentions that, you know, the Bahamas is one of the countries that was protected by Secrecy Acts, and this helped, you know, us stay competitive as a tax jurisdiction, because, you know, countries weren't able to, you know, request information regarding their citizens from us. But of course, all of that has been now removed and repealed and replaced. And this Data Protection Act allows, you know, countries to get information from us on CRS and FACA. And that has, you know, prevented us from, you know, being as competitive as we used to be, because persons would bring their money to the Bahamas or to offshore jurisdictions because taxes in their countries were about 30%. And so it was cheaper to pay, you know, banking fees, $2,000 or $3,000 a year plus wiring fees. It was cheaper to do that rather than pay, you know, 30% of $1 million to your government. And so now we have the Data Protection Act, which, and we still have the confidentiality law, but we have to share the information with the governments of various countries, and the Data Protection Act just puts, you know, controls in place or provides a control whilst that information is being shared. But all the Secrecy Acts that, you know, prevented us in the past from sharing this information are no longer. And so if you read that Tribune paper about the secrets in the dark ages, you know, it will give you some clarity on that. Okay. The paper talks about minor incidences and near misses. Again, you want to create scenarios. I mean, in the book, the paper does say, you know, some wrong filing or some information was stored in the wrong file. And so you want to, you know, list deficiencies like that. And you can, like I said, create scenarios. Once you would have listed the finding, then you want to say what control you would put in place. Obviously, there's a policy or procedure deficiency. Again, you can create that scenario. There has to be a fall down in policy and procedure, or there is a policy and procedure that's in place. However, the staff are unaware of it, or they weren't properly trained on it. And then if they were in fact trained, sustainability may have not been checked. So if you learn a new process or you have an issue and you want to correct it, normally audit comes in and checks and says, okay, we've been doing this wrong all along. Or if a new law has to be implemented, okay, we're going to implement, this is a new change. Before we used to have one signature on a check, now we have to have 2 signatures on the check. And so we come in with a policy and procedure that says, the policy states that now all checks have to be signed by 2 persons. We then have to put in a procedure. This is the procedure. You know, a check is issued by this department. Then you get, this is a signatory list, 2 A's or A and a B signatory required depending on the amount. And then what you do is you would have held that training with departments that it's applicable to, and then you check sustainability after 3 months. So after you would have implemented that, when is it today, January 20th, you then check for the last 3 months to make sure that 2 signatures on every check that has been, you know, negotiated or prepared for a customer. Okay, is that a good example? Hello?
Yes, Ms. Fuller, we listening.
Yes, y'all have to speak back to me. Are y'all hearing me tonight? I don't know if we there, we understanding this? Y'all taking notes?
Yes, ma'am. Ms. Bullard,
Okay.
Just something I don't know if anyone else saw it on the news with the post office.
No, I didn't see it.
When they demolished the post office, they were saying that there was a lot of mails that was still uncollected by persons. And I think it was Eyewitness News. They actually went on site and they were able to like gather mails from different persons who didn't collect their mails. They actually had a check there for Hubert Ingram that wasn't collected. So nobody cleared the post office, the boxes. And so when they demolished the post office, all of that mail was just lying there at the post office.
Oh, wow. That's very dangerous. So when they moved, they didn't move the boxes? I mean, they didn't take the mail out of the boxes that would have been left?
Because there was a gentleman who was there and they was asking him why, how is it that nobody moved this? So I think when they were in preparation to demolish the post office, they put the fence around, locked the gate so nobody could get in there. And so the persons who came to do the demolition, they, I guess, just did what they had to do and that was it. So all the mail, they showed it on, I think it was on last night or night before, all the mail was just, and this gentleman went to pick up these mails. But everybody, whoever had didn't collect their mails, was all over the ground.
Oh, wow.
Personal information.
That was last night news.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, but they shouldn't even have waited to demolition or to a fence being erected before, there should be a privacy officer, I guess, in every institution. And, we in the banks, we have a clear desk policy.
Right. The mechanical energy is equal to the kinetic energy.
Sorry, Sweetie? Hello?
Hi. Sorry.
Sweetie? You're speaking?
No, sorry. That was something else playing in the background. Sorry.
Oh, okay. Okay, yeah. So, yeah, there should be a privacy officer in all institutions. And one of the checks and balances the privacy officer should have carried out when they moved, not when they were very ready to be demolished or when a fence was being erected. When they moved, which would have been 2 years ago, when they moved to the town center mall, the privacy officer should have gone around and checked and made sure that all, documents were taken along with them. So I think that's just somebody not checking, and the checker or the person responsible to ensure that the check was carried out also did not check. So that privacy officer or that senior person who should have verified that the building was empty and all documents would have been carried out, I guess I have some questions to answer about that. Right? Because if I've been in a bank that moved from one branch to the next, and each, department is responsible to, they do a check and then compliance does the check and then privacy comes behind. So obviously, there was a fall down in the control, if they even have that control in place. Okay, good. Thank you for sharing. So again, that's the importance of controls, and you see the risk. The building was sitting there for 2 years and nobody went back and checked. Okay, it shouldn't come out when the building is being demolished if we would have moved away from that building 2 years ago. And at some point within the 2 years, somebody should have said, what about, did we clear the boxes? Did we bring all the information with us? So yeah, that's strange. Okay, yeah, so we want to ensure that the controls are put in place, that we not only write policy and procedure, but persons are trained, and we read from the central bank guidelines last week about the levels of training and who training should be applicable to and what training should be carried out. So you want to ensure that when you write, you don't just say training should be, the whole institution should be trained, but it would be good to put in the various levels and what information that you would put in when you put your schedule in place. To say immediately management will be trained, or the filing room or the operational department that's responsible for documentation will be trained, and the levels, you know, depending on department and depending on levels.
Ms.
Okay,
Bullard,
and then, yes, go ahead.
I have a quick question. How do you ensure that training is sustainable? Like how you said you put a procedure in place and in 3 months you go back to check. How do you ensure that training has been taken in by the employees? Because in this question, it's obvious that, well, if training took place, they didn't understand it.
Well, yeah, your test, your 3-month test is your sustainability test, which
that
means
applies for training too?
Yeah, right, because you will go and check to see, like I used the example of checks being signed by 2 persons. Previously, we signed it by 1. So in the last 3 months, I will take all of the checks that would have been prepared, and I will check to make sure that the new procedure has been implemented. And so every check that only had 1 signature on it, and we don't live in perfect, there are going to be some mistakes. So if I had 20 checks prepared in the last 3 months and only 1 check was missing the second signature, you know, I would probably just make mention that, okay, just send out a reminder. But if I have at least half of the checks, 20 checks prepared and 10 checks have the 1 signature, then that's my check for sustainability, and that's my check to see if my training was efficient. And then I check to see if it was the entire department making this mistake, or if it was just 1 person making this mistake. And then I would pull that 1 person aside and just give them some more training. Or if it was the entire department, then I would speak to them and ask them, are there any difficulties in this new process? Are there any roadblocks? Do you understand the control? Do you need further training? You know, that's how you check sustainability. And then if you would need audit then to come in another 3 months, because normally when there's an audit, you put an action plan in place and audit comes back and check. And if they still see the same negligence or missteps or non-implementation, then they extend, we give you 3 months to fix this. If it's not fixed in the 3 months, we give you 6 months to fix this. And then they normally say, okay, something's wrong in this department. Let's see the CVs of the persons or the resumes of the persons in this department. And then they make a decision if there's enough, you know, the educational level in the department is sufficient, the experience level in the department is sufficient or not. That's normally how it works. Okay, is that clear?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Miss Bullard, so clearly in this case, with this particular question, these persons, there's no sustainability in whatever training they've gotten because the errors are constantly happening. So we would have to go through that whole procedure of audit and whatnot.
Right, so I would identify the issue, then put in recommendations or put controls in place to mitigate, you know, the issues. Then I would request them to, I guess I would prepare an audit, an action plan, and then you check sustainability. And then you check it again, you check it in 90 days. And then like they ask you for long term and short term. And so in the short term, when you would have done your first check and they don't get it, then you have to extend it. And then you have to go to the next step to say, if this isn't fixed, then we have to see if we need more experience in this department or if we need more education in this department. Something has to, you know what I mean?
Okay, thanks.
Yeah. Okay, so what is the risk of incorrect filing? What is the risk of not keeping proper records. I know whilst I was at Royal Bank, I went to Miami, to the Miami branch to administer some training because the document control room was open to everybody. Everybody could come in, request a file, do whatever they wanted to do with it. And when I went to the document control room, you know, they had some 800 clients and at least 100 files were missing. And so we had to come up with a plan immediately, and it just depends on the severity of the problem. So that was very severe, that 100 files were missing. And so what we did is we turned off all controls to the document control room. And so this can be like a control that you put in place. So we recommended that if you wanted to see a file, you would have to come to the document control room and you would have to stand at the door and look through the file while being watched. Then we noticed that a lot of the documents were missing, like the passports copies were missing, the proof of address copies were missing, relevant information or pertinent information from correspondence that should have been on file was missing. So again, we said once you received an email or a request from a client, it was copied to a generic box and the document control room would print it out. And that would ensure that, you know, none of the transfers were missing or, you know, pertinent correspondence was missing from the file. And then that also ensured that, you know, the file was kept in proper order because we had a system where, you know, we had a filing system with, or a file with 5 tabs, and we had KYC on one page, corresponding on the next page, transfers on the next page. And we found that people would come and disrupt the whole entire file and just throw everything back in there. And so we turned off all the files. And so you would need to come and sit inside the document control room to review that file. Another problem that we had was when persons, you know, were let go or they were disgruntled, or they were ready to quit, they took files and they put the entire file through the shredder. So of course, you know, that's the bank's legal documents that if something was to happen with this account, that's what we would need the originals to show up in court with. And then we also had trusts, which were, you know, a trust itself is a legal entity. So we couldn't show up as the Royal Bank of Canada and say, well, you know, somebody got angry and put the file through the shredder, you know, or they took out all the correspondence because they were telling the customer the wrong information and they wanted to destroy evidence. So from that process, we cut off, you know, we cut it off and they had to come in. So that was a control that we put in place. So if you're looking at, you know, what can we do for incorrect filing, because it may not be the fact that it's the people in the document control room. It could be that the files are constantly going out and they're not coming back the way they are supposed to. And if people are just coming to the door and saying, I want this file, and you're not keeping a track or a proper log of who had the file, there's no way you could say, oh, Ms. Bullard had the file and she was the one who rearranged it or took, you know, pertinent information out. So cut off access is
Ms.
one
Bullard.
of the controls. Hi.
I have a question. What if that same scenario you're talking about in terms of files, how does the person in the records office or the document room know that all the information that's in that individual file is there? If I was to come in and request that file and return the file with and there's missing information, you know, like if you were to ask for something later on and there's missing information, how do you account for that? How do you blame or put accountability to either the record department or the individual who used that file?
But that's why we turned off files. So we turned files off, and that meant you had to come to the document control room, and that document control room person was responsible to sit with you whilst you went through that file. Now, mind you, everything for us luckily was online. So they didn't necessarily have to come and view the file. They could just go online and see everything that was scanned. You see, but some people can't, like me, who can't read online. So I needed to go to the document control room and actually physically look. But that document control person was there and was responsible to ensure that I took nothing from the file. I didn't, you know, rearrange it. And if they needed something from the file, the document control room person would be the one to copy it and give them a copy. So the responsibility was left for the document control room. Because like I said, that was in Miami. Immediately when I came back to Nassau, I implemented the same thing in Nassau, turned off all the files, and trust me, that was a horrendous process. And turned the files off, made them come to the document control room, and then we in the document control room, because I managed it, they were responsible for the file. So there was no more who did what. You are now responsible for the file. You cannot give it out. If something is missing, you are now responsible. And that's the only way. Okay? So cut access and then put procedures in place. Then they talked about the logs. Remember last week we talked about the overdraft report, and again, the file room just receiving the overdraft report and nobody's signature on it. You don't know if they actioned the report, but you're accepting it that way. So one of the checks and balances or the controls was to make sure we had a report for every day. Because sometimes, you know, we working with a computer, the computer may not have spit out the report. And so we made sure that we are, even if it was a nil report with nothing on it, we had a report dated every day. The next control was that we distributed the reports. Again, this will fall under management information. We distributed the reports every day, and every day we made sure that we received that report back. And our check was to make sure that an initial was there, and that initial proved that the report was actually actioned. Okay, and then if there are any inconsistencies or gaps, then you document it, and the next time the policy is updated, you ensure that the policy is updated or the procedure is updated to ensure any information that is missing, you know, is updated, and then persons are trained. Okay, another thing that I did was at Royal Bank, I used to call persons, and you work in the, you know, on the family island, but you work in the document control room. I used to ask you, you know, what is your position, to ensure that you understood your position, and then to say what policies do you work with, and repeat to me, you know, a process. And that was a check or control to make sure that, you know, those persons understood what they were doing, and that they didn't only acknowledge, you know, or sign their mandate, they understood. So that's another check that you can do to ensure that, you know, after you administer training, persons do understand what they are actually supposed to do. Okay, and then the book talked about horizon scanning. You know, make sure they stay abreast of what's current. They're going to seminars, they are going to trainings or outside of the institution, or even outside of the Bahamas, depending on if it's the compliance department or any executive department. It shouldn't only be what's happening locally, just normally, you know, something happens in the UK and then in America, then it trickles down to us. So if you want to, you know, be proactive and ahead of the game, then you have to go to international seminars as well.
Michael? Okay.
It goes on to say persons were given new equipment. Do they know how to use it? Does the system work? I think I'm not certain if it was this class, but somebody did state that a new system has been rolled out and the system itself is defective and nobody's doing anything about it. So was it this class? Did somebody say that last week? No?
Yes.
Yes. Okay, right. So of course we know that's a big risk. And like I mentioned earlier, that we could use the Volkswagen scandal as an event or a case to back that up, because again, they say a new system. Does everybody know how to use it? Is it effective? Does it work properly? Then they went to a paperless approach. Again, what are the policies and procedures regarding electronic, I guess, dissemination of information or data protection or confidentiality? Suppose you send it to the wrong email. What are the safeguards in place? And when we look at data protection, it does not only cover privacy and personal information, all of these, the Computer Misuse Act, the Electronic Communications and Transactions Act, the Bank and Trust Companies Regulation Act, all are in relation to data protection. So when you speak of data protection, you should touch on all these various acts, okay, and how they are applicable. Okay, working from home, again, a great scenario. The world had to work from home in 2020 because of the pandemic. Some of us are still at home working. Again, was there any guidance issued? Did the persons talk about the virus and the effects on humans, but did they give you any guidance on confidentiality, your Wi-Fi at home, if it's safe? Did anybody check? Did your computer department check to make sure that your connection is safe? Or in fact, that you even had sufficient, your network was fast enough to load all of those apps that you probably had to use now on your personal. Did you have personal computers, or did you have computers from work? Did anybody get guidance?
Yes, we did.
Yes, we did, and we had to complete training too.
Okay.
Yeah, training.
Online training also. Working training at home.
Okay. So of course you can leverage on that and say, this was the guidance issued, or this was the recommendation. I suggest we, put guidance in place, and then we offer training, and then we actually check to see if it works or if there are any glitches. Okay. Then of course we want to talk about recommendation 1, designing a system to put controls in place, reporting lines, yeah, and I think that's all I have on this. Let me see. Yeah. So it's a very long question, and it has some parts to play, but I think what we're covering in chapter 4 is going to help you pull it together. Okay?
Okay.
No questions? I mean, you're scaring me tonight.
So, Ms. Bullard,
I don't know, but we were just not prepared for this, or because I thought this was what we said we would talk about from last week, no? Or y'all just say, okay, Ms. Bullard, and y'all don't really mean it.
No, we mean it, Ms. Bullard.
So what happened tonight?
So, Ms. Bullard, I just had a question. So I guess when we talk about the data protection, if we decide to do the Bahamas, the jurisdiction of the Bahamas, we can include the penalties also, eh?
Yeah, you could, because remember, you're going to say what your findings are, and then say what the risk is from what you found. So of course, the bank is going to be fined if it actually is a regulatory breach. But the paper says it's not a breach because it didn't go outside. It was found before. It was just that the information was on the wrong file. So it was found before it got outside of the institution.
Okay.
But definitely, if you don't put a control in place, and if you don't fix this now, if you don't get your persons trained and get aware to see exactly where the problem is, then it's just going to grow, eh?
Yeah.
Yeah. So you have to fix it before it gets out of control, and then you have a breach where you have a fine or ask to shut down. Okay, so anybody else wants to add anything else that you think we should discuss in this paper? No, nobody has anything to add. Janelle?
Yes, it's Bullard. No, I mean, right now it's just a matter of just trying to think it through and how you want to approach it. So I don't really have nothing to add. I still trying to choose my sector.
Sorry, you said you?
I said I'm still trying to choose the sector for what I'm going to use because I don't have the banking experience per se. So I don't really want to go with that if I don't have it.
Okay. Well, in the FCRA, because I quoted, I think on the confidentiality section, what did I put on the confidentiality? Yeah, section 35 and 51. Section 35 actually speaks to the non-financial business sector, which are the accountants, the law firms, and the real estate. So, and they say that basically everything is still applicable, you know, whatever is applicable to the banks or to the financial sector is also applicable to the non-financial, and that's where it gives the compliance commission rights. So, I mean, like I said, you could just create any scenario or any sector and just go from there. Because basically, what the same thing that happened, you know, the near misses or breaches will be the same in all and the controls, and all this, the whole sector has to do the same risk assessment, identify the risks, and put the controls in place to ensure, you know, all the information is safeguarded. Okay.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay, good. Any other questions? No? Okay. Okay, so let's go on to reading then. Because you're scaring me. I don't know if you're out there, but let's read page 261, and then we can come back to 200. So 261 just tells you if there's a breach, what you should do if you have a regulatory breach. So we just want to read 261, and we go assessing how serious it is, and then how widespread is the problem, and then we'll go back to 200. Okay, so Ms. Taylor has read the question for us, and we said we don't have no questions or concerns, so we're fine with it. Who is going to read page 261 for us? Anybody, or I have to pick somebody, or I have to access to turn on our cameras so I can see what's going on out there if we sleep or awake. We need to turn on our cameras.
Ms. Bullard, apparently when I printed my documents, I didn't print for some reason the numbering didn't do. Where exactly is 261? Can you just give me whether it's in chapter 5 or chapter 4?
It's in chapter 4. It's section 8.1.
Pardon me, 8.1?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Well, let's say that again, please.
I think that's unit 5.
That's unit 5, yeah.
Oh, yeah, sorry, unit 5. Sorry, 261.
Under which numbering?
8.1.
8.1, okay.
Right, okay, so nobody volunteers to read. Okay, so I see Kim. Kim, you want to read 8.1 for us, please?
Okay, I could read. I don't have 261, but I could read what I have on 8.1.
8.1, probably 260 then, if it's
because mine didn't print out. Okay. Should a regulatory issue arise, the compliance professional is generally expected to assist in providing damage limitation solutions in the short term and to implement a strategy to avoid similar breaches in the medium to long term. For example, by amending the firm's systems and controls. All regulatory breaches are serious, but some are more serious than others. A compliance professional is expected to be able to assess the seriousness of each breach and respond proportionately. Issues to consider in applying a risk-based methodology to regulatory breaches include whether there is any criminality involved, the nature of the breach, and the regulated activity to which it relates. I don't have 261, Ms. Bullard, sorry.
You don't?
Oh, Mom.
So you only have page 260?
Yeah, I have the whole, yeah, I only have 260 and then it skips to page 295. So for some reason that didn't print.
Okay. Who else is there? Jonelle, do you want to continue? For Kim, do you have 260? 261?
Kim, where you stopping?
I stopped at the end where it says whether there is any criminality involved, the nature of the breach, and the regulated activity to which it relates on 260.
Oh, where the bullet points are.
Yes, the bullet points, yeah.
I ain't looking at the bullet points.
To the top of the page, Shana.
The reasons for the breach?
Yes.
The reason for the breach, for example, human error or the deliberate circumvention of controls. Were the existing controls being applied, but were not fit for purpose? The application and effectiveness of pertinent systems and controls. The number of employees involved in the breach, leading to an assessment of whether it can be attributed to an individual's performance or is more widespread, for example, resulting from an ineffective process. The number of clients affected, the extent to which clients have been or could be affected, the amount and impact of any losses incurred, whether any impropriety took place, the fitness and properness of individuals involved, the possible reputational impact on the firm or the industry as a whole.
Okay, drop to the bottom where it says how widespread is the problem.
When a regulatory issue arises, the priority is to assess the nature and the extent of the problem. Compliance professionals should attempt to establish the whole extent of the issue so that having suitably identified it, they can tackle it in its entirety. An issue should not be referred to an external agency without first accurately ascertaining its nature, materiality, and regulatory risk. It should be remembered that the action necessary to correct a breach can subsequently be passed to an external agency, but the responsibility for correcting the breach cannot be transferred away to the regulated firm in which it arises.
Okay, so again, the question says it's not a regulatory breach, but it is widespread. So I thought it would be good to read that to start off so you would know that these are the things that we should check to be then proactive, to ensure that it does not end up into being a regulatory breach, okay? And so now that we know it's not a regulatory breach, we see what controls can be put in place to ensure that it does not end up that way. This is how we design and implement. So let's go to 200, Jonelle, on implementation. And this is how we design and implement a system or put a control in place to ensure that it does not end up to a regulatory breach.
As discussed in Unit 3, any governance mechanisms used in the business must be reviewed on a regular basis to ensure they are functioning as they were designed to. What is important is that systems and controls are fit for purpose. Effective GRC structures underpin a successful firm. A strong statement perhaps, but one that is fundamentally true. These structures ensure there are clear reporting lines through the firm, unimpeded access to the board of directors for those business functions, which are critical operational and management duties, and clearly defined roles and responsibilities. Some commentators argue that GRC processes have failed to prevent serious compliance breaches and failures of governance and have not managed risk effectively. GRC processes failed to alert financial institutions to the risks that led to the financial crisis and to prevent the numerous banking scandals since then. This is not simply a financial services problem, as energy firms, automobile manufacturers, and pharmaceutical companies, for example, have also faced failures and fines stemming from the inadequacies of GRC processes. GRC needs a stronger focus on people and behavior. The LIBOR, London whale, and tax evasion scandals, among others, have shown the crucial importance of behavior and conduct in avoiding governance risk and compliance failure. Any realistic GRC strategy needs to engage and involve employees in understanding its importance and the way it works in practice. Governance and culture are linked. For a firm to develop successfully mechanisms of direction and control that are fit for purpose, there must be the desire to do so rather than just an acceptance of the obligation to do so. Cultural values have to be shared by all employees rather than it being an internal PR exercise to satisfy external commentators or regulators. Therefore, GRC leadership, which can be subdivided into compliance leadership and risk leadership, must be visible. This is a core role of GRC functions and GRC professionals, regardless of seniority or experience, can add real value to the firm by championing and building the understanding of the significant importance of culture and GRC in others. Reporting lines. Effective structures will be demonstrated through documented reporting lines through the firm's hierarchy. These will be supported by agreed terms of reference so that in the event of query, the relevant personnel can be accessed to resolve them. Effective reporting lines are essential so that senior management is aware of business activity and any potential risks associated with the activity in question. In addition, clear reporting lines allow for escalation of issues to the correct decision-making body so that the board and senior management can maintain control over the firm. There have been many examples of firms suffering the consequences of inadequate or poorly defined reporting lines, and researching the circumstances behind these failures and scandals would be a useful exercise in developing more understanding of where mistakes were made and how an effective GRC structure could have avoided them. The example?
We want to read the example on Enron and then the one over on Volkswagen.
Okay. In 2001, Enron, one of the largest companies in the US, collapsed following allegations of false accounting. Fraud, weak systems and controls, and in particular poor corporate governance were blamed for the downfall. This prompted widespread reforms within jurisdictions internationally in relation to international accounting standards and corporate governance. Again, the reporting lines were unclear and ill-defined, so that overall control of the many different activities of the firm was not possible. Volkswagen. The scandal that emerged in 2015 from the revelation that Volkswagen had employed defeat device software to alter emissions on diesel engines pointed to corporate governance failings within the company. It is unlikely that the CEO of the company was involved in the decisions to use the software that allowed false readings to be taken, as the initiative was taken much further down the chain of responsibility. It has been argued that the corporate governance practices in German companies are flawed in some ways. They have split boards, a supervisory board and a management board. This split can make it unclear where the responsibility of one ends and the other begins. This situation does not exist in most other jurisdictions where ultimate accountability rests with just one board. Access to the board.
Okay. No, that's fine. Thank you. So again, that just told us, first we read how to avoid a breach. So of course, in your paper, you can use some of those tips and say that, you know, whilst the problem is widespread, it was found out before it became a regulatory breach. And then what you just read told us about how to design and implement the control system. And if we don't do it, possible, you see what happened with Enron. We see what happened with Volkswagen and how they defrauded the world. Okay? And so before we go on to access to the board and roles and responsibilities, I just want to go back last week again. And I know we spoke about confidentiality, but again, I want to talk about disclosure and I want to talk about confidentiality. So of course, we know the Bahamas laws were updated, like I said, from BTRA Section 19 now to the BTRA 2020 Section 77. And in the Bahamas, again, we only disclose information when we get a production order from the FIU. Outside of that, the BTRA Section 77 tells us that whether we are a consultant or employee or director or what have you, we have the duty of confidentiality to our client. However, with the Data Protection Act, that protects the information and how it's stored and which levels it should be stored at. But in regards to CRS and FACA, we are to, send that confidential information out with, I guess, for the purpose of their taxes. But even though in the Bahamas we send it to our competent authority, they are to, safeguard that information and ensure that it is not, wrongfully handled or misused. And so one of the situations that most companies seem to have a problem with is express consent. Last week I mentioned that express consent is normally on your account opening package, and it just basically says that the client gives their consent. Primarily, if when they send wires, sometimes the correspondent bank, you may be, say, the Royal Bank of Canada, but your correspondent bank may be Wells Fargo or Deutsche Bank or what have you. And in sending out your wire, they may come back and ask for your address or telephone number or purpose of the wire. And at that time, if you go to the client and say, can I share this information with Deutsche Bank, they can decline. And then, of course, Deutsche Bank will decline. So you should be asking for that information up front. But what I've realized with a lot of companies, they do not have a express consent clause in the account opening document. They also do not even have that to share information with their parent, and a lot of their functions are outsourced. The parent are outsourced to a third party. And so I've seen that has been a major issue now. What companies have done is, to share information with their parent, they would have a intra-group form in place where they would ask clients to sign, and even that, sometimes clients say, no, I refuse you sharing this information with Switzerland or with your parent in Canada or what have you. And so sometimes we have a problem, because if the client refuses, then and Switzerland or Canada sends out our wires, then we basically cannot transact on behalf of that client. So you want to go to your institutions and you want to look for that clause on your form where there is express consent. We also realize with CRS and FACA, express consent needs to be on those forms. So right now, and I don't know where the case is, I probably have to go into the newspaper and find out when CRS and FACA came about and it was time to report, ANSPACA reported somebody to Italy, and the law had provided that if the person didn't sign the CRS or FACA form, you could use the KYC on file. And what ANSPACA did was, sent the CRS form to the person did not respond, so they used the KYC on file. The problem was that they had opened their account in 1999. And of course, back in 1999, the AML laws were not in place. Of course, there was no express consent or disclosure clause on those forms. And so after they reported him to Italy, he sued Ansbacher because he said at the time when he opened the account, CRS was not a law in place. And when they did send his form that had the express consent clause on it, he did not sign it. So therefore, Ansbacher did not have a right to, disclose that information to the Italian government. So they are being sued now for that. I don't know how far the case is. So you want to ensure that if in any event you do share information, that express consent clause is on your documentation, and persons understand it, and they know that before they do share the information with the parent or anybody else, you have the client's signature. Outside of that, it has to be like a production order with the courts, and a lot of people just simply say, oh, well, this is our parent, they do all our transactions, they do our back office, or we have this outsourced to another company, and we have no choice. But if that's not in your account opening forms, you want to be careful with that, because under a lot of these acts, your company could be sued. Another thing that just popped in my mind, since we're talking about Ansbacher, which you could perhaps use in your paper as an example that's happening in the Bahamas. Ansbacher also is being sued again. And this was recently in the paper last year, where there's a case that's, I think, it's been going on from 2007 or 2008. And just like the previous case that we read, where the system, they acquired a system, and their customers, they bought out one of an old company, and they took on the clients and they offered a new service, but the system did not have the capacity to, I guess, facilitate the correct calculations for the new service that they were offering. And subsequently, a lot of the calculations or rates that was offered to the client was incorrect. And the client found this out, I think they said this happened between 2007 and 2009. And the client realized it sometime in 2011, that's been suing them ever since. And just in 2020, the case was finally satisfied and the client won. And that they had to pay some millions of dollars out to the client. And now that has opened up a can of worms, because that client would not have been the only one that would have been affected. A few clients, who were offered the same product now, I don't know if they read the Bahamian newspaper or they would even be aware that they would have could have had the wrong calculation as well. So that has opened now. Since that person would have won, you can imagine everybody who would have had an account at that time going after Ansbacher for them to be sued. Did anybody see that in the paper or are familiar with that case? No?
No, I didn't see that.
No? Okay, but you can look that up because that will be very relevant. Again, it's the same case of they acquired a new set of business, or they bought up a new company. The staff that was presently there were not familiar with the system, did not know how to use it. And so therefore, they had that big problem. Okay, so that's the thing about confidentiality. You want to ensure that you have that express consent internally, as well as ensure that any new systems or what have you, because I don't know, even though, they said CRS in fact is the law, they still accepted the case, and Ansbacher was still being sued again because of express consent. So like I said, you can use those two cases that are applicable to the Bahamas in your papers. Okay? Okay, so did we look at what I sent with Ryan Pinder in terms of breaking down the data protection? the Data Protection Act and what it means? Did we have a chance to look at that?
No.
No? Okay. Yeah. Sorry?
Yes.
Yes, okay, so talk to me then. Remember, this is supposed to be discussion-based. You're supposed to read and then we're supposed to have a discussion. Okay, so from what Ryan wrote, what did you get from what Ryan wrote?
The Data Protection Act really governs how institutions...
I can't hear you.
The Data Protection Act is supposed to govern how institutions deal with personal data, and essentially gives parameters about the manner in which it's collected, advising the individual to the purpose for why they're collecting it and sticking with that purpose, ensuring that the information is accurate and that it's kept safely and securely. If it's not kept locally, there are strict, I guess, standards that must be met to ensure that it's secured if it's kept abroad. And giving the, I guess, the client access to the information that you actually do have on them and letting them know if you're sharing it with third parties to the extent of which it's being shared.
Okay, so I saw an ad in the paper that where central bank said they are reconsidering whether or not data can be kept overseas or not because of the pandemic. Are you familiar with that article or no?
Yeah.
Okay, because it led me to believe that there are some, there's some persons who would want to, outsource, especially because their information is being kept electronically. And then you have to have backup systems, especially if it's being kept electronically. But there's some clause there that restricts you from keeping this data overseas. So I just saw it recently that due to the pandemic, they are going to look at possibly updating this law to say that data can be kept, elsewhere. They also mentioned because of Dorian and what happened in Abaco, where basically they said all of the files and everything from the banks, they say all of the vaults just went out into the sea. Did we hear that in terms of what happened with Dorian?
Yeah.
Okay, so what would we do in a case like that? Or there's absolutely nothing that you could do?
That was an act of God. What you want?
Sorry?
I said, in a situation like that, I mean, I don't feel like you could ask someone to keep information secure with respect to an act of God, so to speak. If it's documentation and things, they have done everything that they could have.
Miss Bullard, shouldn't the main offices of the financial institutions that were concerned have a continuity plan in place, whereas the data would have been saved at the main office?
Okay, so of course they have a continuity plan in place. That's one of the requirements. There's an annual certification each year that the central bank requires each institution to do. And one of those requirements is that you have a business continuity plan in place. I don't think it's to the extent where a copy of, of course there wouldn't be a copy of the original file, but it is kept online and there are backup systems in place. But then I guess you would have to actually move to an online business, or you have to go into your backup system and try and print all of that information again. Right?
Yeah, I would think way. I would think that is the purpose of it.
So hopefully they would have. I don't think all of them had it online, because if that had happened after the pandemic, then yes, things would have been kept online. but not prior to.
No, I know the large financial institutions have something they do every year called continuity, and it's something that that's done in case acts of God. And
yeah. So like I said, the continuity plan means that if this building burns down, where are we going to show up to tomorrow to continue on with the banking service? Or if there was a hurricane or what have you, like when we was at Royal Bank and the hurricane was coming, we flew to Cayman. If it was only going to be a category 1 or 2, then we would check into the Island House, or we would check into the Hilton, and so that's basically what is in the plan. I know after 9/11, they saw that all the fireproof cabinets burned to the ground as well. We have fireproof cabinets, and then we have a fireproof room. But again, we've never had an incident. But we have where the Blake Road storage burned down, and it kept all of NIB's records. So did NIB have all those records online, or is all of that data lost? So we don't know, but I know, again, like I said, in your paper, you should talk about record keeping. And of course, we know that central bank requires you to keep all this data for 5 years. And it doesn't have to be a hard copy. And the Securities Commission requires you to keep it for 7 years. So if you have both arms, then you keep it for 8 years to ensure that nothing is destroyed. So in the event of fire or act of God, they expect you to have the business continuity plan in place. And so I guess everybody just will have a backup system. But if, again, you have 800 clients, it's a requirement that you now sit down and everybody in Abaco now needs a file. Do you just sit down and reprint all of that? I expect Royal Bank and the Scotia Bank to have all that online. I don't know about Commonwealth or Fidelity, and it would be interesting to know if, what they had to do to get all of that information back, and if they actually were able to, retrieve it. That would be interesting to know. Okay, so again, the book talks extensively about what data protection is in the UK, but Ryan here broke it down for us. And so, Lavon, do you want to read to us exactly the requirements of our Data Protection Act?
Okay, where do you want me to start? Excuse, my house could be a bit noisy at times.
Okay, so right here where it says Bahamas Data Protection Act.
Okay, the Bahamas has the Data Protection Act that sets forth the regulatory regime for the protection of individual data and establishes a Data Protection Commission as the operative agency to regulate. Before we outline the framework for data protection under the Act, it is important to understand certain key terms. Okay, data subject is an individual who is the subject of personal data. Data controller is a person who, either alone or with others, determines the purpose for which and the manner in which any personal data are to be processed. Data processor is a person who processes personal information on behalf of a data controller, but does not include an employee of a data controller who processes such data in the course of his/her employment. Sensitive personal data relates to specific categories of data, which are defined as data relating to a person's racial origin, political opinions, or religious or other beliefs, physical or mental health, sexual life, criminal convictions, or the alleged commission of an offense, trade union membership. It is the data controller who has the obligation to abide by the requirements of the Act. With respect to the information of the data subject, generally, There are 8 rules that the data controller must follow. 1, personal data must be collected by means which are lawful and fair. 2, the data must be accurate and, where necessary, kept up to date, except in the case of backup data. 3, the data shall be kept only for one or more specified and lawful purposes. 4, the data shall not be used or disclosed in any manner incompatible with that purpose or purposes. 5, the data shall be adequate, relevant, and not excessive in relation to that purpose or purposes. 6, the data shall not be kept for longer than, and where do we go from there? Is necessary. Exceptions, historical, statistical, or research purposes. 7, the data shall be kept secure to avoid unauthorized or unlawful use, accidental loss, or damage. 8, the data must not be transferred to another country unless that country has an adequate level of protection. Collection and process information. 1, collect and process information fairly. To fairly obtain data, the data subject must, at the time the personal data is being collected, be aware of the identity of the data controller, the purpose in collecting the data, and the persons or category of persons to whom the data may be disclosed. Any other information which is necessary so that processing may be fair. To fairly process personal data, it must have been fairly obtained, and the data subject must have given consent to the processing, or the processing must be necessary for one of the enumerated reasons in the Act. 2, keep it accurate, complete, and update. To comply with this rule, you should ensure that your clerical and computer procedures are adequate to ensure high levels of data accuracy. The general requirement to keep personal data up to date has been fully examined. Appropriate procedures are in place, including periodic review and audit to ensure that each data item is kept up to date. Read on?
Yeah.
Okay. 3, keep it only for one or more specified, explicit, and lawful purposes. You may only keep data for a purpose or purposes that are specified lawfully and clearly stated, and the data should only be processed in a manner compatible with the purpose. An individual has a right to question the purpose for which you hold his or her data, and you must be able to identify that purpose. To comply with this rule, in general, the persons whose data you collect should know the reasons why you collect and keep it. The purpose for which you collect and keep the data should be a lawful one. You should be aware of the different sets of data with which you keep and specific purpose of each. 4, use and disclose it only in ways compatible with these purposes. Any use or disclosure must be necessary for the purposes or compatible with the purposes for which you collect and keep the data. You should ask whether the data subject would be surprised to learn that a particular use of a disclosure is taking place. A key test of compatibility is, do you use the data only in ways consistent with the purpose for which they were obtained? Do you disclose the data only in ways consistent with that purpose? 5, ensure that it is adequate, relevant, and not excessive. Read on, Miss Bullard. I have a question with that. I keep seeing this thing about things shouldn't be excessive. Like, for instance, in the book, they keep talking about reports not being excessive. What is this classified as excessive? What does excessive mean? Too much information?
Yeah, when you give too much information, people tend to overlook the purpose or the, whatever control it is. If we give let's say the account opening report, or sorry, the overdraft report again. You know, it may be so much information to this, to go through that you may miss the actual overdraft, which is the purpose of you reading the report. So they keep hopping on. You don't want big files, because a lot of times when you have very large files with non-relevant information, you actually miss what is relevant. So you want to ensure that, you don't have too much excessive information that is not relevant and will cause you to, have an oversight of what is actually relevant or what the duty is that you want to carry out. You don't want to make it, you want to make it as less cumbersome as possible.
Okay, I'm just wondering, as an officer, how do you balance that? Because I actually do reports, and when you keep it too, zinc, then they want more information. So how do you balance it? You put more information in, then it's excessive. So how do you balance it?
Yeah, you have to perhaps create a list, a checklist to say, what is the purpose of this report, and what the control is, and what the outcome should be. And so,
and stick to that.
Yeah, and stick to that and satisfy that, because sometimes you find that you have 3 or 4 reports that do the same thing, and that's wastage, and that's a waste of time as well. So you want to, streamline your processes, make sure that there are no gaps, but you have to also make sure that nothing is overlapping. Okay, and then when you pick up a report, if it says overdraft, you could clearly see that this account is overdrawn, what amount it's able to be overdrawn, and if it's over the limit or not. You don't want to look through 5 pages, 6 pages, then to determine or have to do a calculation to find out,
Okay, but what if you have reports that deal with aged items that are long outstanding that you want to provide, explanations to senior management for the existence of these things on the reports?
Okay, so you put how many days. So at 30 days, this was my explanation. Then you make another column at 90 days. That's my explanation. At 180 days, that's my explanation. And then after that point, you should say, so now I would have passed this on. Our decision is to track this annually because we are unable to satisfy this requirement. So we block this account. So you should then be able to make a decision.
Okay.
And then stop the 30, 60, 90 day tracking, because I'm sure you have other accounts that they fall in, other overwhelming duties. So you want to say that, yeah, I'm aware that something is outstanding here, but at some point my decision was to block it. And so I don't have to track it as much.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. And therefore, if administrators are the reason for them still being on the report, they should deal directly with those persons. Okay.
Right. Administrative problem, not, outside of my scope, something that I'd affect.
Okay, then great. Yeah. You want me to continue on?
Another thing that they speak about is, and I, as I attended seminars, the Securities Commission said it like 3 times in 3 different seminars, and then Central Bank said it in 3 different seminars as well. Data should be kept secure to avoid unauthorized or unlawful use, accidental loss or damage, and then they want you to destroy it. Sometimes people, Royal Bank, like I said, it depends on what type of institution you work with. The Canadians never want to be in regulatory trouble, so they overdo things. They're way more expensive. And the Swiss banks, they cut to the chase. They think the regulation is too cumbersome, so they don't have as much policy and procedure in place. So Royal Bank will say, if the regulators say 7 years, we will keep it for 10, because we want to be sure they may just come back and ask us for something. So they don't want you to keep information laying around for so long that nobody is paying attention to, because of the amount of cybercrime we have and the amount of fraud, because information was just in storage for years after nobody thought it would matter, and the number of stolen identity. And so whatever the law says, 1 year after, you know, I would not be exact to the 7 years. I would say 8 years, but 10 maybe a little bit longer. So a little bit too much. So they also want you to destroy that information when you are supposed to. Okay, don't leave it for years, and definitely just stop forgetting to pay your storage facility and say, oh, 7 years, we don't need to pay that no more. They got to sell that storage facility or they go in there themselves. So you want to ensure that it's always kept and or destroyed after it's no longer necessary. Okay.
Ms. Bullard, is compliance responsible for destroying documents after that expiration date, that period?
Compliance is independent of the business. Independent means you are not operational at all.
So what does compliance have to do with the documents? Do they just check to see whether those documents that are about to be destroyed is going to be destroyed?
Nothing. Compliance does nothing. Operations is responsible for retaining a retention list, retaining a destruction list. Okay? Operations is supposed to send out to the business that we are going to destroy these are the items that are up for destruction this year. Please let us know if you need any of this information before it's destroyed. And you give them 30 days to respond. They don't respond. Operations goes down and shreds. If compliance does not see that email, would say, this is the destruction list. Compliance should say, I did not see the destruction list for this year. Could you please provide it to me?
So the only thing the compliance involvement is just receiving the list.
Right, and they are to ensure that it's actually carried out. And if they don't send the list in a period of time, then you go to the head of that department and say, I didn't see a destruction list. It's now 2021. Can you please provide me with an update?
Because I know
you have to track it until it's done, not that you have to do it yourself. And that's what the book talks about. You know, compliance must stay off, independent, and just ensure that the various departments, carry out their duties or remain compliant. If there's a policy, you ensure that they abide by what the policy says.
Okay.
Yeah, but we have to remember to stay independent, because again, then we have that checker checking the checker. Right? And sometimes departments are behind. And then if they are behind, then you ask them to put an action plan in place, and then you just track it, or you ask management to track it and then confirm to you. But institutions, again, and it talks about the roles of compliance. Institutions seem to think that compliance is the center of expertise for the entire organization, and everything that nobody knows or every new implementation, it must fall on the compliance department. And then you find compliance becoming very operational. And so I'm glad you asked this question so we can cover roles, plain and simple. Yeah, independent. Each department head, if you're operations head, then you are responsible for the operational aspect of the business. Compliance should not be telling you what to do. And we have had managers say, please remember that I am the manager of this branch. Okay? And so when something new is implemented and something goes wrong, then you remind them, please remember that you are the manager of this branch. And I am only to ensure that you met this, regulatory requirement. Is it met? You have 120 days after the end of the year to complete these financials. I just need to ensure that you did it. Okay, not that I do it for you, not that I, constantly track you and tell it stuff.
So I have a point. Oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
I have a question. You said to destroy the data, right? Mm-hmm. But what happens if the FIU comes in with a production order, or, many of these laws have just been enacted and our clients have been with us for decades. All right, so we have to go back to those old files to get the information.
Yeah, but it
to clear.
But it says you are to only keep those for 5 years. I mean, central bank if you're a bank. So you are able to cull files. Now, normally banks do not keep information. They do not destroy information until a file is closed. Normally, it's 5 years after that relationship is closed. But if an account been open from 1999, they really can't expect you to have every wire transfer and everything from then. You see what I mean? Because the file will grow and grow and grow and grow and grow. And so every 7 years, the system would turn off and we would destroy those extra information 7 years before. But we do have a department where, research can be done and it's kept on the tape or whatever to free up the system. Now, on the regulators part, on audit part, you are supposed to be audited in line with how you are risk rated. So if you are risk rated high, you are audited every year. If you are risk rated medium, every 2 years. If you're risk rated low, every 3 years. So definitely no audit department or nobody should be asking you for information 5 years after, you know what I mean? It's been done. Sometimes it's not relevant. Now, in cases, they ask you for it, but they hope that you may have kept it. There's no law that will say we're going to fine you because you didn't keep it. So once you keep it within, the term that you're supposed to keep it, that you're okay. So they can't ask you for something that's more than 5 years.
Okay.
Right?
You should be
we had a trust department. We had a trust department, and we said because that's a legal entity, we kept that for 25 years. Okay. The law still said 5, but we kept it for 25. And then anything relatable to the bank itself, we keep for 15 years.
Okay.
Because we want to prove ourselves if anything went wrong.
Right. I've been in the industry long enough to see them come with the orders and stuff. And I know you have to go back to these files that have been put away for decades.
Right. But again, you can only be fined. See, you could have your own internal policy and nothing is wrong with that. Like I said, the Canadians are definitely way more excessive. You know what I mean? They don't ever want to be in any type of issue where they can. So they retain longer. But now you see a lot of banks are closing down. Will they truly keep their offsite storage for 25 years after they would have closed down? Think about it. Think about the cost. Think about the person who has to man that.
Yeah.
And all of that. And then, again, somebody who has to keep checking and all of that. But again, the law will ask you for it. And if you have it, then yes. If you have it, if they ask you within 5 years and you don't have it, then you have a problem. But anything beyond that is just an ask, not that you could be fined.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, good. Yeah, so be careful of the rules. The board is responsible. They delegate their authority. They delegate responsibility, but you cannot delegate accountability. And so anybody can carry out a task for you and be responsible for the task. But if something goes wrong, the board is then still accountable. Okay? So thank you. I mean, for the most part, all of us have this on the data protection. And again, I think you stopped at 5. It says ensure that it is adequate, relevant, and not excessive. Retain if you can read this in your own time. Retain if no longer than is necessary for the purpose or purposes. Exceptions include data kept for historical, statistical, or research purposes. Keep it safe and secure. And give a copy of his or her personal data to the individual on request. So if you have customers now, especially with CRS and FACA, their accounts might have been closed from 2017, but they are still coming back and asking, they need to provide this to their country to get some clearance to ensure that they didn't evade any tax or do anything wrong. So you will have various requests. Okay? Okay. So you can continue to read that in your own time. We talked briefly about the roles, but again, like I said, we want to make sure that there's no conflict. And like I say, many compliance professionals see that there's a conflict when they go in. They're hired as a compliance officer, but then remember I told you compliance itself is split into AML, regulatory compliance. They're now, if they don't have a risk officer, and risk is a big area, they're putting risk on the compliance. In my last position, I automatically became the corporate governance person, and I didn't understand that. And then if they don't have a lawyer, they expect you to be legal, and I had to constantly say I'm not a lawyer. Okay? And so there are many hats, and I always tell the story of every when it's one of these Fortune 500 countries, right? Companies right here in the Bahamas there. Before we even started the audit, we said this one person in the compliance department has too many hats. There's no way this person can even decipher through the amount of work that they have. And so we stopped the audit. They had to hire 2 persons to do that one job, what was going on. And so, yeah, you want to be careful. And I think it's so bad that or the MLROs and the compliance officers were having such an issue that the Securities Commission actually has it in their AML policy that compliance can only have that one title. Compliance cannot have 3 and 4 titles. Now, of course, it's hard to enforce that because, like I said, once I worked at this company that was shutting down, and they just started to let persons go. And as they started to let persons go, they said, oh, we still have customers who have to be reported for FACA. We still have customers who have to be reported for CRS and to the IRS and for QI. And I said, but then you can't have the operations manager go. And the next day, I know they've like the operations manager go on this their last week, and I just had to do it. And I pulled out the policy for them, and I said, you are now making me operational. And they said, but these don't close, it don't matter. But just be sure that you don't get caught up in those situations. And if you find yourself getting caught up in these situations, then recommend that they hire a relief person who could actually take on, if people leave all the time, and sometimes they don't have somebody suitable to, take the position, but as compliance, you should say, let's be proactive. You need a floater or a relief person who will back up for vacations when people leave and what have you, to avoid these hats being just, thrown on you. So it happens often. And do you really want to report your company? I don't know if you would be in good standing with your company after you would report them for giving you all these various positions. And I once had an exit interview with the central bank there. I explained this to them. How do you track this? We put a lot of policy in place, but is it truly being enforced? The regulator says you should only wear one hat. And they say, well, we are asking for your job descriptions. I say, yeah, but they're not going to put this on my job description. They just basically pass it on to me. So you need a second step. The job description isn't sufficient. So they said, but we also have the annual with the MLRO. So these are, this is the opportunity to discuss any, issues that you may have. But, so they do have some controls in place, but like I said, in the interim, right there, the task has to be carried out. The institution is going to be fined, and so they just expect you to pick it up and make it happen. Okay. So the last thing I want to talk about now is the policy and the procedure. So the policies state what you do and why in brief, whilst the procedure states how you do it and this will achieve and what it will achieve. Okay, so policy is what you do, and then the procedure is how you do it and what the outcome should be. So we want to ensure that, again, department heads write the policy and the procedure. And again, the same very bad institution that I was at had all their policies and procedures and forms from 2003. And of course, we know the law had changed so many times since then. And all the policies and procedures had to be rewritten. And they hired me to assist them with this. However, when I went to each department head, like the head of finance, she basically thought I should sit down and know all the IFRS policies, and I should be able to put them in place myself without her help. The same thing for HR. HR expected me to write the whole entire employee manual and not even give me any input. You know, so it's very ludicrous and very crazy. Credit department too, you know, so when you get to be the head of this department, or if you are in compliance and you're looking at these job descriptions, ensure that the heads of departments understand that they are actually responsible for the policy and procedure in their department, and they are to ensure that, you know, it's formatted properly. There's a version date. The pages are dated. It says what year, you know, even on the forms that are applicable to them, because a lot of times, you know, we are so overwhelmed and with work, we just let these things fly through the crack until something happens. So what compliance job is should sit on a board to review and give comments before it's approved, or say, yes, okay, it can be approved. But the head of that department is responsible for that policy and to ensure that it's enforced, and even to check it before audit comes in and says that something is wrong or there's a issue. That head of that department should have their own review process in place to ensure that it is you know, carried out properly. The head of that department should make sure that there's proper segregation, there's proper reconciliation, all information applicable to their department is recorded. Again, compliance should just ask, please confirm that your policy is applicable, or these are the laws of the Bahamas. You know, there should be a compliance legislative matrix that irons out every Bahamian law that is applicable to your institution. And it should state, you know, section 5 of the FTRA says all institutions should have risk assessments. So you tell that to the risk person, and you want to ensure that they have a policy and procedure in place regarding their risk assessment and how it should be done. Then you verify that they carry out training and check sustainability, and they are enforcing the policy, and then the dates that the risk assessment is due is they are aware of, and they are ensuring that, you know, they meet those deadlines. Compliance is responsible for the AML procedure, and a good way to ensure that you have everything that is required. Whomever is your regulator, you get their AML guidelines, and you look at their table of contents, and you just ensure that all the topics, like the central bank guidelines, all the topics where they talk about this is the AML framework, make sure you have that. This is what is required for training. This is what's required for record keeping. This is what's required for risk. And you ensure that those same topics that are in the central bank guideline is you know, it should be basically a carbon copy, and you should just tailor it to your institution. There may be some topics there in the, you know, the AML guideline of the central bank. They talk about trust, but your company does not offer trust. And so you just leave that out. They may not offer, you may not offer services to pets. So anything regarding pets, you leave that out. You align your AML policy with your risk appetite, with the products and services that you offer, and you ensure that you get all of the laws that are applicable, and those laws reflect in either your AML policy or in another guideline. So again, some of the policies may be 1 or 2 pages. So for those 1 or 2 pages, you just put that paragraph right in the AML policy, and you ensure that you have adequate information in your AML policy. Now, at one point, there was a conflict with an AML policy where central bank had come in and done an audit and said, your policy is not adequate. It does not have all of the updates required or the changes that were made to law. It does not cover all of the products and services that you offer or all applicable law. And so the person, I guess, said the central bank, so what's missing? The central bank said, I tell you what, you go to Deloitte & Touche and let Deloitte & Touche tell you what is missing. And so Deloitte & Touche did a comparison of what should be, what was in the policy and what should have been in the policy. And so, you know, they judge and I'm gonna like, could I say you wanna be, you know, I don't know if, you know, according to the matrix or the legislative matrix, that it has sufficient information for you to just mark off to ensure that you would have covered everything that was pertinent in your AML policy. You want to do that check, or if you want a third eye and your company is willing to pay, then you could let them do a comparison on your behalf, especially if it's a new company or a startup, or you know, you don't work directly with implementation and design and what have you. But after you would have gotten that for the first time, any subsequent updates will be, you know, your responsibility. And this doesn't only go for the AML department, but the compliance department on the AML policy for all policies and procedures. You want to ensure that whatever the relevant law is, when you do your checks, if it's credit, you pull out, this is the credit framework, these are the laws that are applicable to credit. Do they have, you know, and do a check off and say from according to, you know, the laws of the Bahamas and what's required for credit, I see everything implemented in this policy. Right now, there's a new law. This credit bureau is going to come out. That's going to make major changes. How are we going to implement that into our organizations? Is that going to fall on compliance, or will the credit department now implement that? Are they sufficiently trained? Nobody knows about it. But as compliance, we should, I guess, pay attention to what happens in America, because Equifax and whatever has been around for a very long time, and then we perhaps need to compare it to the law. So if we're on the board to check that, we could make sure all the relevant, you know, parts of the law are implemented into internal policy. And of course, we know that compliance, you know, deals with all complaints, with confidentiality. The central bank has just put in place the Office of the Ombudsman that deals with customer complaints. And so therefore—
Excuse me, I have a question, please, in reference to the AML guidelines. When the central bank comes in, does the AML take precedent over the existing policies and procedures? Is the AML handbook more important than the policies and procedures book?
Well, there should be no conflict, because the policy, I mean, when you say policies and procedures, which policy and procedure are you referring to?
Okay, you have policies and procedures for different departments, and then you have the AML.
Right, and so there should be no conflicts, or there should be no gaps, because the central bank is going to take your AML policy and test based on what your AML policy says. So perhaps that they will test your compliance department based on your AML policy. The credit department has their own policy and procedure, so they will test based on the credit department policy and procedure. So there are a whole list of functions that go on in each department that they test. So sometimes they will test account opening, or KYC, or, you know, so KYC would not be in a credit policy. KYC would be in a AML policy. So based on what the AML policy says on KYC, they will check the credit department part.
Okay.
You know, then they will check limits in the credit department to make sure that Ms. Bullard was allowed to approve this loan or this credit card. It was within her limit. That wouldn't be in the AML policy. That would be in the credit policy. So they work like hand in hand, depending on which function the auditors are checking.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Like that. Yeah, so you just have to know. That's why it's important to read the table of contents to see, you know, you may say, oh, I'm in the credit department, I want to see what it says about KYC. You wouldn't find that in the credit department policy and procedure. You should find that in the overall AML policy of the bank, because it should be across the board what is required for KYC. Okay, there may be some other information that, you know, you may need for a loan that you may not need to open an account, like a job letter, but that will be under the conditions to get a loan approved. You know, so it just depends on, that's why I say you have to tailor it to your business. There's guidelines and then there's internal policy. What you want to ensure is that there's nothing in the law that is missed in your internal policy, but you will see across institutions, I may decide to say, like I said, with the Swiss, the law says one piece of ID, the Swiss says one piece of ID. The law says one piece of ID, the Canadian bank said, we want to put something in place to ensure, to protect us against human error. So if they ask us for one, LeVon's cousin might come in and say she coming right back. So LeVon will say, no, we need two pieces, you know. So you would find that the Canadian banks are more conservative and they ask you for a little bit more. And that's just to protect against human error. Okay. With advertising and promotions, you know, there's always some fine print on the promotion, and compliance normally checks those, you know, that fine print, and they test that promotion before it's sent out to the public to ensure that what we are offering, you know, there's a pandemic and things stuck all around. And so they want to ensure that, you know, the officers are not compromising themselves. We found that we also needed to test the targets that were set, you know, because there was a big ring that we saw, you know, one year, we saw that targets were set, and the same target that was set in Freeport was set in the Bahamas, I mean, in Nassau. Is that really realistic, knowing that, you know, the history of Freeport for many years, even before this pandemic? Do you think that somebody in Freeport should have the same target for sales that they have in Nassau? LeVon? LeVon, you still there?
Yeah, that definitely should not be. Yeah, the persons in Freeport are dealing with a lot more than the persons in Nassau.
Right. So what we found that the same target was set for Freeport as was set for Nassau. And guess what also happened that year? The person in Freeport won. Nobody in Nassau had met the topic, the target, sorry, and the person in Freeport won. And what we saw was that that person in Freeport, when they announced, because they normally at Royal Bank used to get a cruise, or used to get money for the top salesperson, and used to have a big program every year, a big Christmas party where we announced, we call it Royal Performance winners. And another Canadian bank, we saw the same thing. The person in Freeport had won. Nobody in Nassau was able to meet the target. It was already strange that the same target was for Nassau and Freeport. And that, you know, just woke up the entire audit department. And so what we found was that persons in Freeport were offering if you would have gotten a loan, they would automatically give you a credit card. They would give you a line of credit. They would give you like 4 or 5 different products that you did not ask for. Within the first week, it would be recorded as sales points. And then before the first payment came due, we saw that they closed it out in the system. And so they did this for more than 100 accounts, right? And that's why it appeared as if they, you know, had all these sales for the year. But when we checked and we did an investigation, we found out that that is how they defrauded the system. And they ran up and they collected that prize and they went on that cruise and you know, everybody was talking. It was a big thing. And we've since then put controls in place to ensure that the goals that are set or the targets that are set for account officers are realistic and achievable and will not push persons to, you know, steal or compromise themselves. Because we saw that one year, 130 account officers lost their jobs simply because they didn't make target. And so a lot of persons were under pressure, and we saw all sorts of fraud and all sorts of stuff coming out of that. So that's where the compliance department gets involved to ensure that we're going to test this promotion. We're going to read the fine print and see if teachers, you know, you're offering them a credit card and you're saying introductory rate of 3%. So of course, every teacher will run into the bank and apply for that card. And then in 1 year, the rate goes up to 25%. And nobody knew that. So you have a list of complaints coming in. So we just want to ensure that any promotion or any advertising that's put out there that, you know, it does not compromise the institution, and people are reading the fine print. Again, we want to be, you know, sure that you are aware of the risk appetite, because when central bank comes in, and we had the case where people, you know, stated their risk appetite was that we don't do business with PEPs. And then in the AML procedure, there was a whole procedure on how you handle PEP accounts. And then we saw that there were 10 PEP accounts on the books. Okay, so you want to ensure that whatever you say you do, you actually do. And so if you say you don't have an appetite for PEPs, then we, you know, look at your books. We don't expect any policy and procedure to be there or any account. And the thing about it is, we said, well, why do you have a procedure for PEPs? They couldn't answer us. We said, okay, give us a copy of all your PEP accounts. And they brought us a list of 10 PEP accounts because they didn't have them categorized properly. And they simply did not know what the risk appetite said. Nobody had looked at it for years. Okay? Then the risk appetite said, we don't do business with these countries, Russia, Venezuela. And then you look at their books. And again, they have 5 Venezuelan accounts. So you want to ensure that you know, and a lot of these policies and procedures have been in place for years and have not been updated, and things have been changed. And laws that, like I said, with the BTRA on confidentiality, if you have that on your account opening forms, please make sure you change it to the right section. And next time, just put the bankers in trust. Don't put the section, because the section can always change. You know, so you want to be careful with that. You want to ensure that everybody who in the firm knows what the appetite is, knows what the policy and the procedures say. This is why you don't want it. You know, the AML guidelines for the central bank is like 91 pages, very cumbersome. Nobody is going to read that. So you want to scale down your policy, but I mean, you want to ensure that, you know, all the parts are, you know, applicable parts are in there. And so it is easy to read, and you want to go through it in sections so persons are not overwhelmed. When you carry out trainings, you want to, you know that we carry, you know, we covered section 1 last year. This year we'll do section 2 and 3, and then we will test to ensure that this is you know, relevant, applicable, people are aware, they know what we mean. They know what we mean when we say enhanced due diligence. They know what to do. Just the other day, somebody called me and said, Ms. Bullard, somebody told me we don't do enough for enhanced due diligence. I said, so what do you have in place? And that person could not even explain what they had in place. So be sure that you understand like methodology and where this information comes from. And if you say we don't do business with a high-risk country, what is a high-risk country? Who makes it high risk? Where do you get this information from? Understand the methodology behind all this madness. Don't just speak, you know, and a lot of people cannot explain what they do. They don't know which policy and procedure is applicable to their job. Some people don't even know their own job description is really bad. Okay, and we show up to work for 15 years not knowing because these policies and procedures are too cumbersome, and everybody has a problem reading. But gone are the days when you can just take these positions because they come again. Like I said, you can transfer. I'm the head of this, and I delegate this and I delegate that, and I just supervise. Gone are those days. Everything is enforcement. It says you can delegate your responsibility. You are still accountable as the head. Okay? The policy and procedure belongs to you. The dissemination of information is your responsibility. The ensuring that your staff is trained, you are accountable. Checking sustainability, if you just stand up and I just say all of this, and you all didn't have this paper to write, and then we see what grade you get to make sure that you understand and you know how to apply it to your everyday life, and you could give real life scenario, then all of this makes no sense. Okay, and then we need to come in and check in 6 months to your institutions to see if you actually know what you're doing. So there's no like one fits all approach, one size fits all approach. There's no sitting down and talking for hours and then no action behind it. Central Bank has an analytics department. Securities Commission has an analytics department. They are very hands-on. Nobody has been to jail. People are gonna go to jail. Central Bank now has a list where if you would have been a chronic compliance officer where the bank has failed, and the bank has failed, and the bank has failed, they put you on a block list. Remember, this position is a regulated function and they have to approve it. So you want to ensure that, you know, you abide by the rules and you make sure that the business stays compliant. You're not afraid to speak up. You network so you can liaise with the right persons, like-minded persons who can help you make the right decision. And you document all the decisions you make and how you came to that. Okay, so we can't look at the policy and procedure and say, oh, there's too much pages, or I didn't have time to read. If you're in the position, you must make time to read it. You must make time to carry it out and ensure, especially if you supervise persons, you have to ensure that they, you know, everybody just checking the boxes and they actually understand and you do some checks and balances before audit comes in and shuts you down. Because like I said, on the last audits that I've been, almost every department that had deficiencies, we asked for the CVs. Are these persons going to seminars? Are they in school? Are they doing any type of upgrading? Or are they comfortable that the law has changed and the system don't work and they don't know what to do and nobody doing nothing about it? And we allow these things to go on and on and on and on. And we let the incidences go from minor to major. And we don't do anything about it until somebody come to sue us or the police knocking on our door and we go to jail. Then we would have wished, you know, we had done things differently. Okay? So Ms. Bullard can talk all night long. I need some feedback now. Y'all tell me. No feedback? No response?
I was just thinking about something that you had mentioned earlier in reference to the credit bureau, particularly from a commercial standpoint. I think that may be a challenge in some instances, whereas persons may not be able to qualify for loans because now they have to disclose, all of their information. So that may be, I think it's a good thing, and I think it may be bad in some instances also.
I guess it is a good thing, but if all your payments, all of us are employed, even though there's a pandemic, and I said, when you hear that they say it's about to start, ensure that you pay all your bills. Once your bills are paid up to date, when they start, I thought they were supposed to start January. So if all your bills were paid up to date for January, or for December, when it starts in January, then you go in with a good rating. But if your bills are already behind, then it's a bad thing, and they don't offer you any credit. You can't get any credit until you fix that. And I don't even know how to fix it at this point. But for those who are in those positions, account opening positions and credit positions, you have to find out how, or it's going to affect your bottom line, because most of the hotel employees and whatever, they probably going in with a bad rating beyond their control. I don't know, the government has to perhaps do something to help them out. But we have to really move from, being in debt so much. And what we really need is financial solutions. I applaud the credit unions, because at least when you do get a loan with them, they say, part of your payment, let me help you have a savings, or at the end of your loan, you'll have a savings. Other banks like Commonwealth Bank and stuff, I don't know if they promote that. So are we truly giving, financial advice, or are we just keeping these people in debt?
Fidelity does it.
Fidelity does it as well. Okay, very good. And right. So if you offer these people a loan and kiss you on meet your target, that same savings account will help you meet your target as well. And then you attach it to their payment. So if their payment is 200, let them pay 250 and make sure they have a savings at the end of the day. But if you're constantly putting these people in debt and you're giving them solutions, you're not really a relationship manager or account officer, because you don't give no financial advice. So, Kim, if you work in that area, find out what the law states, find out how it works, and ensure that you understand before. In 5 years, we could be saying, "Oh, we didn't know how to do it, and nobody didn't know it." Blah blah blah. It's been around in America for years,
right?
So we have loads of examples. Or we will end up with people who cannot borrow anymore or don't need an account, and then what happens to us? Okay, so before it even starts, let's find out how it works and how to make it work properly before it gets out of control in the bonds. Okay?
Okay.
Another thing the book talked about was safety deposit boxes, safekeeping, and what have you. And I have a story about that where, we had safekeeping for many of our clients, and for most part it was like legal documents or wills or conveyances and stuff that we kept. But one person did bring in some jewelry, and when they died, we also had their will, and so their children came and got their will, and then we said, well, we have something in safekeeping, and they said, okay, well, everything was built up. They came in to check safekeeping, and it was this little box, and it had a diamond ring, a very, very old dusty diamond ring, a Rolex watch, and some gold jewelry. Everything was very old and dusty. It looked like before all of us was born. They put it in safekeeping. You know, Royal Bank been around from 1908. So that could have been in there from 1908. How would it look? And so we gave it to them. They opened and they looked at it and they said that the bank, they accused us of changing out the, I think that was a 2010 or 11. They said, oh no, my mother would have never kept this garbage and would have never willed this to us. So they accused the bank and they took out a lawsuit against us and said that the staff had stolen out the original Rolex and diamonds and what have you, and left this, you know, junk, you know, for them. And so there was no way for us to prove it. Now, we used to assign a value to safekeeping in case the bank had burned down or there was a robbery, you know, and we had an insurance on stuff that we had in safekeeping. But we pulled out, how did we assign a value? We didn't know what the value was. And we asked the customer to give us a proposed value. So we learned a valuable lesson. We shouldn't be asking if you're going to hold jewelry or any documents, shares, or whatever you, and sometimes you don't even see what the client puts in the box. And so that's where the safety deposit box would be. Safekeeping, we had to put some controls in place where we had to, first of all, we had to put it in dual custody so there could never, you know, people can't say that one person had access to it and you don't know if somebody did actually steal and replace the stuff with old dusty stuff that had no value. Then we said, if we are going to keep jewelry or anything of value, we will not accept it without an appraisal. So also the insurance wanted us to send that appraisal to them so they could know that, hey, this was worth $1 million or what have you, and that they gave us sufficient insurance on it. So based on that experience, you know, in that lawsuit, you know, we were able to put the proper controls in place to make sure that, you know, we saw that what we have in safekeeping, we documented it. 2 persons had access to it and that we got it appraised. And so again, we were being reactive. We want to put all these controls in place and test them to make sure that they make sense and they actually work. And if you have 800 customers, you don't have to test all 800. If you have 50 functions in your department, you don't test all at once. You create a schedule, just like the paper is asking you, a long-term and a short-term schedule. This is very important because I didn't check this function for a very long time, so let me put this on top. But if you have a list of 50 functions in your department, you know, when you have 800 clients, you check a percentage. And from that percentage, you could say, I'll check 5 high-risk files, 4 low, 3, and you know, and you just start to do a review and you check it before audit comes in, and you will be very surprised at the deficiencies that you will pick up before you even with audit comes in, and definitely before the regulators come in. And you should be doing a check. You don't just depend on audit or internal controls, or that's their job. No, if you want to truly do good at what you do, you will check and try to remedy things before the persons come in and you know, say that this is missing, and you definitely want to read your policy and procedure and ensure that your department is aware and ensure that you're doing things properly. Somebody else should not come in and tell you, oh, you're missing a complete step and this is the risk and this is why, you know. And definitely, you know, we don't work in perfect. Like somebody said, the system isn't working. If the system isn't working, we definitely want to have documentation that we reported this, that we even sent a solution, that we knew that there's so much risk with the system not working, and we have a workaround and we have a solution. We don't just show up to work every day and say, you know, we signing off on the report and filing it, and then you could be accountable for that if it's there. Okay, so be careful of all of that and ensure that these minor incidents don't turn into major incidents and turn into regulatory issues. Okay? Okay. Okay, so are we gonna, any questions? No questions, no concerns, no comments. Okay. So for next week, are we actually gonna read, or we come into class just to listen? Are we gonna read and try to see if we retain any of this, or are we just showing up as we need to show up?
You can read, Miss Bullard.
Okay, so this week was just a tough week. The first week, you're saying, Miss Bullard, you had a little great. You just coming back, you not tired. Today, everybody was very, very quiet. Tira, I'm surprised you here. Tira, you didn't even speak to me today. Tira, how you doing?
I am good, thank you. How are you?
I'm fine, thank you. I'm happy that you're here. I'd like you to talk back to me and give me some feedback, and let's have a discussion so to make sure that we understand this and we retain in this. Not that we just showing up to check the box and that we reading.
You have a number of new students. Yeah.
Sorry, somebody was saying something?
Yeah, you have a number of new persons.
I can't hear you. No, we still can't hear you. Hello? Kim, you can hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, yeah, you could have, I think that's Kareem Higgins is trying to speak. You heard him?
Yeah, I think he was saying that we may have a number of new students, and then the conversation ended.
Oh, okay. Okay, where are these new students coming from the other classes, or where? I thought this was the class that we started in AML. This is in the same class?
Some of us are here.
Yeah, some of us, yeah.
Okay, but you have some new people. Okay, so the new people, who is holding the group? Jonelle, it's you who has the WhatsApp group?
Yes, I have the group for the original group class.
Okay. Okay, so if anybody, if you miss anything or if you need any help, there's a WhatsApp group. I guess you can send your number in the chat to Jonelle if you're all planning on adding other persons and networking and helping each other. So there's some support out there. So hopefully you all get together and you all read chapter 5 and you all come with questions and concerns and we could have a provocative discussion next week.
Sounds good.
You sound so sad. And it's like, okay, put it.
Yes, Miss Bullard, we can try. I read, but I didn't read everything.
Okay, but at least is what we read. Is it clear? Are we receptive? Are we going to retain any of this?
So did you break it down good though? The email that you sent us, the question, you break it down good so we know how to like approach it. So that was very helpful tonight because I think the question is just very long.
It is. It even overwhelmed me.
Yeah, very much.
And I said, I know they read this, so let's read it. So this person's allowed a first read. But this is why I want you to get started. Please organize yourselves and take a stab at it. And like I said, by the time you get to the actual class, which is only a month out of the due date, you will have Miss Jackie to be able to, review and give you some pointers and some tips or anything, from her point of view, it may be very different, but at least you'll have some meat there or all of us well versed in. If we're here, we did it very good in AML and so we're comfortable. Sorry, Katrina?
Oh, no, go ahead, finish.
No, and I'm just asking, are we now comfortable that we don't need this extra support or assistance or?
No, ma'am, I'm comfortable.
No, Miss Bull, I just wanted to say, I sent you an email because So you could respond to me, where you could send me the items that you sent out, please, because I didn't get it.
Okay. Let me look. And that's Katrina. You sent me an email, and then Robin, I have your email from the chat. So it's just Katrina and Robin that didn't get it.
Yes. I sent it to T-Bullard 1800 at Gmail.
Yes.
That's you? Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, you're welcome. Okay, so anybody else? Any questions or concerns? And like I said, this is the forum for it. So it's with hope that you read, because we can't cover every single page. And so if I would miss something and you want some more clarity, this is where we, get our questions answered. So please, take some time and read, look at the chapters and come prepared to have a discussion, because you don't want to spend so much time, like LeVar was saying, Ms. Bullard, we got to read all of this, but yes, that's a big part of your paper, right? So I wanted to make sure at least you saw it once, because the information is so comprehensive, and you have to scale it down. Important parts. Okay? But y'all got to talk back to me. So read for the next class, chapter 5 on 228, read the first 25 pages. And like I said, come prepared to give me feedback, and let's talk about it, about risk. Again, all of this is very pertinent to the paper and to the question that you have to answer. And as you see, there are many parts. So we want to give you enough information, but not too much, so that you miss the point or the important parts. Okay?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
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 Okay. Well, I hope you were able to get some notes.
Okay, Ms. Bullard.
Okay, I hope you were able to get some notes and could retain some of that. And so we'll do this again next week, same time.
Okay.
Good night.
Okay, good night. Have a good evening.
You too.
Okay.